Look at her hands shake when she writes the checks. Mike's voice echoed through my kitchen, followed by cruel laughter. Like watching one of those Parkinson's commercials. Just a stupid old lady who knows nothing about construction. We'll be gone with her $300,000 before the walls start cracking. I froze on my back patio, one trembling hand still raised to knock on my own door. The plate of fresh-baked snickerdoodles, my late husband Frank's favorite, nearly slipped from my grasp. I'd only stepped out to retrieve more cookies from the cooling rack in my garden shed, eager to show appreciation to the renovation crew who'd promised to restore my flood-damaged home. Did you see her yesterday? Ryan's voice now, the young apprentice who'd helped me carry groceries just this morning, showing me pictures of her dead husband again, crying about how much he loved his study. Meanwhile, I pocketed that gold letter opener right off his desk. Widows are the perfect targets. No husband to question our methods. That was Jason, the foreman who'd knelt beside me last week when I'd broken down at the sight of Frank's water-damaged books, promising they'd salvage everything possible. Her kids never visit, so no one will check our work anyway. Did you tell her that cheap laminate was imported hardwood? Mike again, his voice smug with satisfaction. Better. I told her it was rare Brazilian cherry. Cost us $2 per square foot, charging her $22. More laughter. I told her this marble was Italian when it's just painted concrete. She keeps bringing us cookies while we're actively robbing her. Jason's voice dripped with contempt. Yesterday she thanked me for being so patient with an old woman, like we're doing her a favor. The electrical wiring we installed will probably cause a fire. Hope her insurance is paid up. Ryan's youthful voice sounded almost gleeful. The
foundation repair is just spray foam covered with dirt. Her house will collapse in the next heavy rain. Remember when she cried about not having enough for her husband's headstone? Mike's voice dropped slightly. I took that money from her dresser drawer last week. Found her wedding jewelry too. That's going straight to my girlfriend. We're filming her in her bedroom through hidden cameras we've installed. Ryan added, triggering another round of laughter. Got quite a collection of Grandma gone wild. She'll either die from black mold or go broke trying to fix what we've done. Either way, it's hilarious. The plate slipped from my fingers, shattering against the stone patio. Cookies scattered like broken trust. I stepped back quickly, heart thundering against my ribs, and pressed myself against the siding before they could discover me. Hot tears burned my cheeks. Tears of humiliation, of betrayal, of crushing realization. How could I have been so gullible, so trusting, so perfectly, pathetically, the stupid old lady they mocked? But as I stood there, shoulders curved with shame, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped. My spine straightened. My breathing steadied. The fog of grief that had clouded my judgment since Frank's death began to lift, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity I hadn't felt in 15 years. They thought they were stealing from a helpless widow. They believed the gray hair and arthritis meant my mind had similarly deteriorated. They assumed my FBI credentials framed in Frank's study were merely my dead husband's accomplishments. They had no idea they were robbing a former special agent who'd spent 30 years bringing down exactly their kind of predator. I carefully backed away from the door, mind already calculating. Not just how to stop them, but how to ensure they never targeted another stupid old lady again. Frank and I purchased our Victorian home in Oakwood Heights 43 years ago, when we were young and filled with dreams. The sprawling 1890s structure needed work. Sagging floors, outdated wiring, plumbing that groaned like a dying animal. But we saw only possibility. 3 bedrooms for the children we hoped to have, a wraparound porch where we'd grow old together, and enough historical character to warrant the lifetime of renovations we jokingly called our ongoing marriage project. We'll fix 1 room per year, Frank had promised, spinning me around the empty living room the day we got our keys. By the time we're done, we'll be ready to start over with the first room again. Life had other plans. My work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation kept me traveling, investigating complex financial crimes that targeted vulnerable populations. Frank's career as a literature professor at Bainbridge University meant long hours in his study, surrounded by first editions and student papers. Children never came, but our marriage remained strong, built on mutual respect, shared intelligence, and the understanding that our work made a difference in the world. My wife catches bad guys who steal money, Frank would proudly tell colleagues at university functions. She can spot a financial scam from a mile away. And I could? Once. For 30 years, I tracked paper trails across state lines, interviewed victims whose life savings had vanished, and testified against con artists who preyed on the vulnerable. I specialized in construction and investment fraud, particularly schemes targeting the elderly. The irony of my current situation doesn't escape me now. How do intelligent people fall for these scams? A rookie agent once asked me. Vulnerability changes perception, I'd explained. Grief, isolation, medical issues, they create cognitive blind spots. Even the sharpest minds become susceptible when emotionally compromised. When I retired at 57, we had plans. Travel, volunteering, perhaps finally renovating the kitchen with the farmhouse sink I'd always wanted. But 3 months after my retirement party, Frank was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. The next 15 years became a different kind of mission, caring for the brilliant man who slowly forgot our life together until pneumonia took him last winter. I still remember our last lucid conversation, Frank's hand clutching mine with surprising strength. "Maggie," he'd said, using the nickname only he ever used, "promise me you'll make this house yours after I'm gone. Not a museum, not a mausoleum, yours." I'd promised, but grief is a curious thing. It doesn't just break your heart. It reorganizes your world. The house that had been our sanctuary became a shrine to memories. Frank's study with books stacked in the particular order only he understood. The creaking third stair he always skipped. The garden he tenderly maintained, even as he forgot the names of plants he'd once cataloged with academic precision. After his death, I wandered these spaces like a ghost myself, touching his things, sleeping in his sweaters, maintaining a frozen tableau of our life together. When the pipe burst during February's freeze, flooding his study and the adjacent rooms, it felt like losing him all over again. Water-damaged first editions, ruined research notes, mold growing on the walls he'd painted Oxford blue, because it reminded him of his doctoral days. My neighbor Clara urged me to see the destruction as an opportunity. "Renovate, Margaret. Create a new space for your new chapter." At my age? I'd laughed hollowly. "What chapter? The epilogue?" "Stop it," she'd scolded, her 78 years giving her seniority in our friendship. "Frank wouldn't want you living in a crime, or a moldy one at that." She was right, of course. After decades investigating crimes against the elderly, I'd seen too many seniors retreat into deteriorating homes, too overwhelmed or frightened to address necessary repairs. I wouldn't become that statistic. Using Frank's life insurance and our savings, nearly $300,000 set aside for a retirement we'd never share, I decided to repair the water damage and finally make the upgrades we'd always discussed. The farmhouse sink, the sunroom addition, the modernized bathrooms with accessible features for my increasingly unreliable knees. Finding Premier Home Renovations seemed like divine intervention. Their website showcased stunning transformations of historic homes. Their reviews glowed with praise from elderly clients. Their credentials, licensing, insurance, professional affiliations, appeared impeccable to my still sharp investigative eye. When Mike Phillips, the project manager, arrived for the estimate, his compassionate demeanor sealed the deal. 40-ish, with salt and pepper hair and a well-practiced, gentle manner, he reminded me of the victim advocates I'd worked with at the Bureau. "I can see how much this home means to you, Mrs. Calloway," he'd said, noticing the way I caressed the doorframe Frank had marked with yearly measurements of a nephew's height. "We specialize in preserving historic character while making spaces comfortable for your future." He listened attentively as I explained what each room meant to me, especially Frank's study. "We'll handle his books and papers with the utmost care," he promised. "My father was a professor too. I understand the emotional value." I signed the contract that day, writing a check for the 50% deposit without even consulting another company for comparison. $150,000, gone in a single flourish of blue ink. "You won't regret this, Mrs. Calloway," Mike assured me, his hand warm on my shawl. "Alder."
We treat our clients like family. The work began a week later. Mike introduced his team. Jason, the ruggedly handsome foreman with photos of adorable children on his phone. Ryan, the charming apprentice who called me ma'am and carried my groceries. And various subcontractors who came and went in a flurry of activity. For the first time since Frank's death, the house felt alive again. I baked cookies for the crew, brought them lemonade on hot days, and listened to their stories about their families. When they suggested upgrades, this imported tile would really make the bathroom special, Mrs. Calloway, or these fixtures are pricier, but they'll last forever. I agreed without hesitation. I trusted them completely. After all, hadn't I spent my career teaching others how to recognize scams? If anyone could spot a con artist, it would be me. How wrong I was. How catastrophically, humiliatingly wrong. Before going to the next part of the story, we have a request as we have dreamed to reach 1,000 subscribers. And without your support, it won't be possible. Kindly subscribe our channel, also like the video, and share your thoughts in the comment. Have you ever been taken advantage of by someone you trusted? How did you handle it? Don't miss out on the turning point of this story as we reveal what happens when these contractors learn who they're really dealing with. Now let's get back to the story. The first red flags were subtle, easily dismissed by a woman who wanted desperately to believe in human decency. A delivery truck that arrived after dark, unloading materials without paperwork. Discrepancies between the samples I'd been shown and the products being installed. Workers who grew quiet when I entered rooms under construction. Is everything all right with the hardwood? I asked one afternoon, noticing the flooring looked different from the sample I'd selected. Lighter in color, with a strange synthetic sheen. Absolutely, Mrs. Calloway, Mike assured me, steering me away with a gentle hand on my elbow. This is actually an upgraded Brazilian cherry. Same price for you, but better quality. My supplier owed me a favor. I nodded, accepting his explanation despite the twinge of doubt. Frank used to tease me about my bloodhound instincts when it came to inconsistencies, but 15 years of retirement and grief had dulled those senses. Then, there was the marble countertop for my kitchen island, the centerpiece of the renovation, where I'd imagined rolling out Christmas cookies with Clara's grandchildren. This is that Italian Carrara we talked about? I asked, running my hand over the surface that somehow didn't feel right beneath my fingertips. Too warm, too smooth. The very best, Ryan confirmed with his boyish smile. They've developed new finishing techniques that give it this unique texture. I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe someone cared about doing right by the home Frank and I had cherished. The alternative was too painful to consider, that I, Margaret Calloway, who had once testified before Congress about predatory contractor schemes, had fallen victim to the very fraud I'd spent a career fighting. As weeks passed, more worrisome signs emerged. A building inspector who arrived while the crew was at lunch, leaving a notice of code violations I never saw because Jason intercepted my mail. Neighbors mentioning that work continued late into the night when I was visiting my sister in Tucson. Subcontractors who seemed confused about project specifications. I thought we were installing copper pipes, one plumber muttered, not realizing I was within earshot as I brought coffee to the kitchen. Just do what's on the revised plans, Jason had snapped, shooting the man a warning look. My concerns mounted, but so did my hesitation to confront them. What if that's wrong? What if my suspicions were just manifestations of grief? Or worse, the beginning of cognitive decline? At 72, I'd seen too many friends begin that terrible journey, insisting that caretakers were stealing when items had simply been misplaced, or becoming paranoid about well-meaning family members. Perhaps I was misremembering the materials we'd discussed. Perhaps the night deliveries were simply accommodating busy supplier schedules. Perhaps the code violation notice was a mistake. I began testing my memory with daily exercises, recording observations in a journal, completing crossword puzzles, reciting case details from my FBI days. The results were reassuring. My cognitive faculties remained sharp. Yet still I doubted myself, caught in the limbo between suspicion and confrontation. Then I found the invoice. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late June, unusually hot even for Virginia. The crew had left early, something about a supplier meeting, and I was alone for the first time in weeks. Restless and uneasy, I decided to organize the growing stack of renovation paperwork in Frank's study, now stripped to the studs, but still serving as my makeshift office. A folder had fallen behind the desk, contractor invoices labeled, "Supplier Originals, do not share with client." Inside were the true material orders: laminate instead of hardwood, prefabricated countertops instead of marble, basic fixtures instead of the premium brands I'd paid for. Most disturbing was a separate accounting sheet showing the actual costs against what I'd been charged, a markup of over 400% in some categories. My heart raced as decades-old investigative instincts flickered back to life. This wasn't just overcharging or cutting corners. This was systematic fraud. I photographed every document with shaking hands, then returned the folder exactly as I'd found it. That night, I couldn't count. Asleep, my mind calculating the extent of their deception. By morning, I'd decided to contact the authorities, but I needed more evidence. Concrete proof of their intentions, not just their actions. The next day, I played my role perfectly. I baked cookies. I asked innocent questions about their families. I exclaimed over the beautiful craftsmanship of work I now knew was substandard, all while keeping my ears open and my phone's voice recorder running in my cardigan pocket. "Mike, the new windows are lovely," I commented, noting how the ill-fitting frames had been concealed with excessive caulking. "They keep out the drafts so well." "Only the best for you, Mrs. Calloway," he replied, shooting a smirk at Jason when he thought I wasn't looking. "They're triple-insulated German engineering." They were standard single-pane windows from the local home improvement store. I'd found the discarded packaging in my trash bin that morning. For a week, I gathered evidence while maintaining my facade of doddering gratitude. I noticed items disappearing: Frank's antique pocket watch, my mother's silver letter opener, cash I'd deliberately left in forgotten locations. I documented each theft, each lie, each dangerous shortcut in the construction. But nothing prepared me for what I would overhear 3 days later, standing outside my kitchen with a plate of snickerdoodles, as they revealed the full extent of their contempt and criminality. I didn't confront them that day. Special Agent Margaret Calloway might have stormed in with righteous fury, but 72-year-old widow Mrs. Calloway knew better. Instead, I quietly retreated, gathered my wits, and formulated a plan worthy of my FBI training. First, I needed comprehensive evidence. Using Frank's old laptop, I ordered 3 small security cameras disguised as phone chargers and a voice-activated recorder that resembled a decorative clock. Within 2 days, I had my surveillance network established in key locations throughout the house. "Such a lovely clock, Mrs. Calloway," Jason commented during his morning inspi. "Action. Is it new?" "A gift from my niece," I replied, pouring him coffee with hands that no longer trembled. "She worries about me being alone." "You're never alone with us around," he assured me with that practiced smile I now saw through completely. The next week brought a flood of evidence that exceeded even my worst suspicions. The cameras captured Ryan applying a thin veneer over particle board while describing it to me as solid mahogany. Jason instructing workers to use watered-down paint that would require repainting within months. Mike on the phone with suppliers, canceling orders for materials I'd already paid for, and substituting inferior products. But the recordings revealed something even more sinister than construction fraud. "The electrical wiring we installed will probably cause a fire. Hope her insurance is paid up." Ryan laughed during a lunch break, sprawled in my kitchen where Frank had once lovingly prepared Sunday breakfasts. "The foundation repair is just spray foam covered with dirt. Her house will collapse in the next heavy rain," Jason added, mouth full of the sandwich I'd made him. Mike's voice dropped lower, but my recorder caught every chilling word. "I took the money she set aside for her husband's headstone. She cries about her dead husband while showing us their photos. I used those moments to steal her jewelry." My hand instinctively went to my throat, where Frank's mother's pearl necklace had hung until I'd misplaced it last month. "We're filming her in her bedroom through hidden cameras we've installed," Ryan continued, to raucous laughter. "Got quite a collection of Grandma gone wild." The coffee mug in my hand shattered against the bathroom tile where I was listening to the playback. These weren't just thieves. They were predators who took pleasure in my humiliation. who violated my privacy and dignity in ways that went beyond financial exploitation. I spent that night searching my bedroom and bathroom, finding 3 hidden cameras disguised as smoke detectors and air fresheners. I left them in place, now understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just fraud. It was elder abuse, invasion of privacy, and criminal conspiracy. The final straw came the following evening. Reviewing footage from my bedroom camera, I discovered Mike methodically searching through my dresser drawers, pocketing the antique cameo brooch Frank had given me on our 40th anniversary. As he turned to leave, he spotted the framed photo of Frank and me on our last vacation before his diagnosis. "She'll either die from black mold or go broke trying to fix what we've done. Either way, it's hilarious," he told the empty room, then deliberately placed the frame face down before leaving. Something broke inside me, and something else awoke. The grief-fogged widow receded, and in her place stood the federal agent who had once brought down a 6-state construction fraud ring targeting senior communities in Florida. I made 3 phone calls that night. The first was to my former colleague, Special Agent Diana Ortiz, now the white-collar crime supervisor for the local FBI field office. "Maggie, it's been years." Her voice warmed with recognition. "What's going on?" "I need your help, Di," I replied, using her old nickname, "and I have a case you won't believe." The second call was to my nephew, Daniel, a building inspector for the county who had offered to review the renovation when it first started, an offer I'd declined, not wanting to burden him. "Aunt Margaret, I've been worried about you," he said immediately. "Mom says you've been too quiet lately." "I've been busy, Danny," I replied, careful to keep my voice steady. "But I need your professional expertise now. How quickly can you do a complete inspection of a REIS? Novation in progress?" The third call was to Clara, whose son-in-law happened to be an assistant district attorney specializing in elder abuse cases. I knew something was off about those men, Clara declared without surprise. "James will be livid when he hears this. He's prosecuted these types before." With my team assembled, I detailed my findings and my plan. Diana would handle the criminal investigation, coordinating with local police. Daniel would document every code violation and substandard material. James would prepare charges related to elder abuse and fraud. "They picked the wrong old lady," Diana said after listening to a sample of my recordings. I could hear the smile in her voice. The same smile she'd worn as my rookie partner 20 years earlier, when we'd caught a Ponzi schemer red-handed. "How do you want to play this, Maggie?" "Like we used to," I replied, feeling more alive than I had in years. Let them hang themselves with their own rope. The next morning, I greeted the crew with fresh cookies and a new persona, more confused, more frail, more exactly what they thought a stupid old lady should be. "Mike, dear," I said, intentionally calling him by the wrong name. "Do you think I should pay the rest now? I keep forgetting which bills I've paid." The predatory gleam in his eyes told me everything. "Actually, Mrs. Calloway, that would be very helpful. We have some specialty materials coming next week." Of course. I nodded vaguely. "My memory isn't what it used to be. You've all been so patient with me." He patted my hand condescendingly. "It's our pleasure. We understand how overwhelming this must be for someone in your situation." For 2 more weeks, I played this role, growing increasingly disoriented and vulnerable before their eyes. I left my checkbook visible on the kitchen counter. I mentioned my upcoming cataract surge. "Airy?" I shuffled around in Frank's old slippers, appearing more feeble each day, all while the cameras recorded their escalating theft and fraud.
"I think she's going senile," Ryan commented one afternoon, pocketing a silver picture frame while I was supposedly napping. "She asked me the same question 3 times yesterday." "Perfect," Mike replied. "The more confused she is, the less likely she'll notice when we skip the bathroom remodel entirely. We'll tell her we finished it last month. She'll believe us." The culmination came when I deliberately let them see me receiving a call from my financial advisor. "Yes, Mr. Peterson," I said loudly, knowing they were listening. "I'll transfer the remaining funds from my investment account. The renovation is going so beautifully, I've decided to use the rest of Frank's life insurance too. That's another $150,000. That evening, Mike approached with practiced concern. Mrs. Calloway, we're reaching a critical phase of construction. It would really help if we could get the remaining payment a bit early. Oh? I feigned confusion. I thought I paid you everything. No, ma'am. Remember? Half now, half upon completion. But since we're making such good progress, it would help our cash flow to have it now. I nodded slowly. Of course, dear. My memory isn't what it used to be. Let me write you a check right now. My hand trembled authentically as I wrote the check for $150,000, the remainder of what I'd agreed to pay for renovations that were nothing but elaborate fraud. I dated it for the following Monday, knowing they wouldn't be able to resist trying to cash it immediately. Bless you, Mrs. Calloway, Mike said, tucking the check into his pocket with poorly disguised triumph. We'll make your home perfect, I promise. I know you will, dear, I replied, patting his hand. You've all been like sons to me. The flash of guilt that crossed his face lasted less than a second before being replaced by calculation. We feel the same way. In fact, why, don't you let us finish up while you visit your sister? You mentioned she's been asking you to come. What a thoughtful suggestion, I agreed. I could use a little vacation. The trap was set. That weekend, I packed a small suitcase and made a show of leaving with Clara, who drove me around the block and back to her house. From her living room window, we watched as a nondescript van parked across from my home, FBI surveillance, courtesy of Diana. Are you nervous? Clara asked, handing me a cup of tea. Not nervous, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. I feel like I've woken up from a very long sleep. Monday morning, Mike arrived at my bank with my check, flanked by Jason and Ryan. They'd barely reached the teller when Diana's team moved in. Simultaneously, another FBI unit with a search warrant entered my home, where they discovered the substandard materials, falsified building permits, and, most damning, the hidden cameras in my bedroom and bathroom. Daniel's inspection team followed, documenting every code violation, every substituted material, every instance of dangerous workmanship that threatened not just my home, but my safety. It's worse than we thought, Aunt Margaret, he told me later that day, his face grim as he showed me his findings. The electrical work alone could have caused a fire. The foundation work is criminally negligent. If you'd lived here another month, with what they'd done to the ventilation system, you'd have been seriously ill from toxic mold. By afternoon, Premier Home Renovations was exposed as a shell company with a history of defrauding elderly homeowners across 3 states. Mike Phillips, whose real name was Michael Peterson, had 4 previous arrests for similar schemes. Jason and Ryan had warrants in other jurisdictions. The company's glowing online reviews were fabricated, their impressive portfolio stole, and from legitimate contractors. I watched it unfold from the safety of Clara's home, fielding calls from Diana as the case expanded to include other victims. 15 in total, all seniors, mostly widowed, collectively defrauded of over $4 million. You've still got the touch, Maggie, Diana told me that evening. This is going to put these guys away for a long time. And we found your jewelry in Peterson's car, including Frank's mother's pearls. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with something darker. The violation of my trust, the invasion of my home, the cruel mockery of my grief. These wounds wouldn't heal simply because the perpetrators were facing justice. When I finally returned home, I stood in the half-demolished kitchen, surveying the shoddy workmanship and dangerous conditions they'd created. My retirement savings were largely gone, recovered funds tied up in legal proceedings that could take years. The house Frank and I had loved was in worse condition than before the renovations began. For the first time since discovering their fraud, I allowed myself to cry, not the quiet tears of a victim, but the cleansing sobs of a warrior who had fought and won but still bore battle scars. Frank, I whispered to the empty house. I kept my promise. I didn't let them take advantage of me, but I'm so tired of fighting. As if in answer, the doorbell rang. On my porch stood a gray-haired man in work boots and a faded denim shirt, flanked by 2 younger men carrying toolboxes. Mrs. Calloway, I'm Robert Jenkins.
Diana Ortiz asked me to come by. He extended a weathered hand. I was in the bureau for 20 years before retiring to start my own contracting business. Thought maybe one old Fed could help another. Behind him stood a small crew of workers, each wearing FBI Alumni Association caps. "We can't undo what those crooks did," Robert said gently, "but we can help you rebuild. Properly. This time. No charge, just materials cost. Consider it a professional courtesy from one agent to another." I looked at these strangers, this unexpected brotherhood of former agents volunteering their skills, and felt the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen. "Frank would have liked you," I told Robert, stepping aside to welcome them in. He always said FBI stood for family backing integrity. "Smart man, your husband," Robert replied with a respectful nod. "Now let's talk about that farmhouse sink you've been waiting for." Over the next 3 months, Robert's crew, all former law enforcement officers who'd found second careers in construction, transformed my home. They salvaged what they could from the shoddy renovation and rebuilt the rest properly, documenting every step to serve as evidence in the upcoming trial. Meanwhile, the legal case against Peterson and his accomplices expanded. Diana discovered they'd been operating under various company names for nearly a decade, specifically targeting widows and seniors living alone. The hidden cameras in victims' homes hadn't just been for their perverted entertainment. They'd used the footage to blackmail seniors who discovered their fraud. "They're looking at federal charges now," Diana informed me during one of her regular visits. "Wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, exploitation of elderly, invasion of privacy, conspiracy. Not to mention the state charges for construction fraud and elder abuse. They'll be away for decades." Peterson's attorney approached me about a plea deal. His client would provide information about other fraud rings in exchange for leniency. "What do you think, Maggie?" Diana asked. "Should we consider it?" I thought about the other victims, those who, unlike me, didn't have FBI connections or specialized knowledge to fight back. The seniors who might even now be writing checks to Simile are predators. Yes, I decided, but with conditions. He provides a complete list of every victim, every accomplice, every penny stolen. He forfeits all assets for victim restitution, and he records a public service announcement about contractor fraud targeting seniors. He'll never agree to that last part, Diana said skeptically. Then he can face the maximum sentence, I replied. Let him explain to his cellmates that he got there by robbing grandmothers. To everyone's surprise, Peterson agreed to all conditions. Later, his attorney confided that my reputation in the bureau had preceded me. Peterson had discovered too late exactly who he'd targeted. When he realized you were that Margaret Calloway from the Florida Elder Fraud Task Force, he nearly had a heart attack, the lawyer admitted. He said crossing you was the biggest mistake of his career. The trial of Michael Peterson and his accomplices became a landmark case in elder fraud prosecution. Clara's son-in-law, ADA James Martin, approached it with personal fervor, presenting not just the financial crimes, but the psychological abuse, the mockery, the violations of privacy, the deliberate exploitation of grief. I testified for 3 days, bringing 40 years of professional experience to the witness stand. No longer the confused widow, I presented evidence with the precision of the federal agent I'd once been, detailing each fraudulent act with documentation and recordings. Mrs. Calloway, Peterson's defense attorney asked during cross-examination, isn't it possible you misunderstood some technical aspects of the renovation process, given your age and lack of construction experience? I smiled, removing my reading glasses to look directly at the jury. Counsel, before my retirement, I supervised the FBI's Elder Fraud Task Force for the Mid-Atlantic region, specializing in construction and contractor fraud. I have testified as an expert witness in 47 federal prosecutions involving schemes identical to the one perpetrated by your client. So no, I did not misunderstand. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. From the defense table, I watched Peterson's face drain of color as he finally understood whom he had dismissed as just a stupid old lady. No further questions, the attorney mumbled, returning to his seat. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge, herself in her 70s, delivered a scathing sentence: 18 years for Peterson, 12 each for Jason and Ryan, and orders of restitution totaling $4.2 million to all victims. The court finds the defendant's predatory targeting of elderly individuals particularly reprehensible, she declared. Mrs. Calloway may have been the one to expose your crimes, but this sentence reflects justice for every vulnerable person you exploited. As they were led away in handcuffs, I felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction that they could harm no one else. The story made national news, with headlines proclaiming FBI retiree brings down elder fraud ring and scammers target wrong widow. Requests for interviews flooded in, but I declined most, agreeing only to speak with AARP magazine about recognizing the warning signs of contractor fraud. What mattered more than publicity was the unexpected community that formed in the aftermath. Robert and his crew of FBI retirees not only repaired my home, but established the Frank Calloway Foundation for Elder Fraud Prevention, offering free home inspections and contractor vetting for seniors. Diana used the case to secure funding for an expanded elder fraud division, hiring me as a civilian consultant to train agents in recognizing exploitation tactics. Most meaningful was the network of fellow victims who found their voices after hiding in shame. We met monthly in my newly renovated sunroom, sharing stories over coffee served from the farmhouse sink that had finally become reality. I thought it was my fault, 80-year-old Judith admitted during one meeting, that I was too stupid to know better. That's what they count on, I told her, passing a plate of snickerdoodles, now a symbol of reclaimed power rather than naivety. They weaponize our self-doubt. But there's no shame in trusting people. The shame belongs entirely to those who abuse that trust. 6 months after the trial, a certified letter arrived from the federal penitentiary where Peterson was serving his sentence. Inside was a handwritten apology and information about other fraud victims his team had targeted, information he hoped might mitigate his sentence. I passed the letter to Diana for investigation but kept his closing lines. I've spent my career believing elderly people were easy marks because age diminished their capacity. You've taught me that I was not only criminal, but profoundly wrong. I will serve my time knowing I was outsmarted by exactly what I dismissed, the wisdom that comes with age. The public service announcement Peterson recorded as part of his plea agreement became required viewing at senior centers nationwide. In it, his orange jumpsuit visible against the prison backdrop, he detailed the tactics he'd used and urged seniors to verify contractor credentials, get multiple bids, and never pay more than 10% up front. If someone had shown my grandmother this video, he concluded, she might not have lost her home to scammers like me. My home renovation was finally completed on what would have been Frank's and my 50th anniversary. The house was beautiful, safe, accessible, but still filled with the character we'd cherished. Frank's study had been restored with built-in bookshelves for his salvaged collection, and a small memorial corner held his photograph alongside the recovered jewelry he'd given me throughout our marriage. As I hosted a small gathering to celebrate the completion, Daniel raised his glass in a toast. To Aunt Margaret, who reminded us all that age doesn't define capability, and to Uncle Frank, who always said she was the smartest person he knew. I touched the pearl necklace at my throat and smiled at the assembled faces, family by blood and family by circumstance, united by restored justice and renewed purpose. To underestimated old ladies everywhere, I added, may we always prove the scammers wrong. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected visit from Diana, carrying a thick file folder. We've been going through Peterson's records, she explained over tea in my new kitchen. He was meticulous about targeting victims, kept detailed notes on how he selected them. And? I prompted, sensing there was more. And you weren't random, Maggie. You were specifically chosen. She slid a document across the table, a target profile with my name at the top, my FBI career noted in red ink. He knew? I asked, stunned. He knew my background and still targeted me? Diana nodded grimly. He saw it as a challenge. Your FBI connection was actually a selling point to his crew. Proof of how good they were, taking down someone who should have known better. I stared at the paper, a cold fury building inside me. They didn't just think I was a vulnerable old lady. They targeted me because of my career. There's more, Diana continued. We found this in his storage unit. She handed me a flash drive. It contains footage from the cameras they placed in your home. Peterson was planning to use it for a training video for other scammers. How to con a Fed. The violation felt fresh again, deeper. Not just a crime of opportunity, but a deliberate attack on everything I'd stood for. What do you want to do? Diana asked quietly. I thought about it for a long moment, then straightened my shoulder. I want to teach. 3 months later, I stood before a class of new FBI recruits at Quantico, my former workplace. Behind me, a screen displayed photos of my partially demolished home. Vulnerability isn't weakness, I began. It's a universal human condition that predators exploit. You will spend your careers catching criminals who target the vulnerable, but remember, that vulnerability could one day be yours. I clicked to the next slide. Peterson and his crew in handcuffs. These men thought age had diminished me. They saw gray hair and arthritis and assumed my mind had similarly deteriorated. Their mistake wasn't just criminal. It was profound human error. For the next 2 hours, I detailed the case that had become a textbook example in the Bureau's elder fraud curriculum, not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as an agent sharing expertise. When the session ended, a young recruit approached me. Agent Calloway, my grandmother was scammed by contractors last year. She never reported it because she was ashamed. Call her tonight, I told him. Tell her there's no shame in being victimized, only in victimizing others. As I gathered my materials, Diana joined me. That went well? Ready for the next session? I nodded, straightening my FBI civilian consultant badge with pride. Age brings challenges, Di, but it also brings perspective. These kids need both. Walking through the halls of Quantico again, I felt Frank's presence beside me, heard his voice in my memory. Make this house yours, Maggie. Not a museum, not a mausoleum. Yours. I had done more than that. I had reclaimed not just my home, but my purpose. The contractors had tried to steal my money, my dignity, my security. But in targeting just a stupid old lady, they had awakened the agent I'd never truly stopped being. They thought I was just a grieving widow, isolated and vulnerable. An easy mark whose age made her mentally diminished, whose loneliness made her pathetically grateful for their false concern. They believed the gray hair and arthritic hands meant my mind had semblance, orally deteriorated, that I would neither recognize nor resist their exploitation. In dismissing me as just a stupid old lady, they made the same mistake countless criminals made during my FBI career, underestimating those they deemed powerless. Age brings challenges, certainly. My knees protest each morning. My eyes require stronger glasses each year. I move more slowly through the world than I once did. But age also brings wisdom, perspective, and a lifetime of accumulated knowledge that doesn't simply vanish with retirement or bereavement. I think often about the other victims who didn't have my specialized background, who suffered in silence believing their exploitation was deserved punishment for being old or alone. How many seniors accept substandard work, agree to unnecessary repairs, or endure outright fraud because they've internalized society's message that aging equals incompetence? When I speak to senior groups now, which I do regularly as part of the Frank Calloway Foundation's outreach, I remind them that vigilance isn't paranoia, that questioning isn't rudeness, that protecting yourself isn't selfishness. The greatest weapon against elder fraud, I tell them, isn't just awareness of scammer tactics. It's recognizing your own continued competence and worth. The hidden cameras that once invaded my privacy now serve a different purpose. The footage, with my face obscured but the contractor's crimes clearly visible, has become a training tool for law enforcement nationwide. What was meant to humiliate now educates. What was meant to exploit now empowers.
Last month, I celebrated my 75th birthday in my beautifully restored home. Clara was there, along with Daniel, Diana, and Robert's construction crew. As we gathered on the wraparound porch Frank and I had dreamed of growing old on, I realized I had found a new family, one built not on blood, but on
And mutual respect and shared purpose.
To Margaret, Diana toasted, raising her glass, who taught us all that underestimating seniors is the real stupidity. If my story offers any lesson, it's this. Your value doesn't diminish with age. Your right to respect doesn't fade with retirement. Your capacity to recognize mistreatment doesn't vanish when you lose a spouse or when your hair turns gray. To those watching who worry about elderly parents or who are seniors themselves, trust your instincts, ask questions, seek second opinions. Remember that confusion or uncertainty aren't signs of weakness. They're appropriate responses to contradictory information. And to those who target the vulnerable, believing age makes for easy victims, beware the stupid old lady with nothing left to lose and a lifetime of experience you fatally underestimated. You never know when the frail hand writing you a check once carried a federal badge. Thank you for watching this deeply personal story. If it resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. We're working toward reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to us. Please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you love experienced elder fraud? What warning signs do you think are most important to recognize? Remember that protecting our seniors isn't just about preventing financial loss. It's about preserving dignity and respect for those who've earned both. Together, we can ensure that wisdom is recognized as the invaluable asset it truly is.